In Palestine, at least 12 civilians were killed, including children, and others were wounded during the early hours of this Saturday. In Guatemala, there is expectation over the inauguration of Bernardo Arévalo as 52nd president after months of protests against the country's attorney general. In Yemen, United States and United Kingdom carry out airstrikes for the second night in a row. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from TeleSUR Studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. New Israeli bombardments on the Gaza Strip leave dozens of civilians dead, while communication services remain cut off for the second day in a row. This regarding the genocide case filed against Israel by South Africa before the International Criminal Court. Israel carried out new attacks on the towns of Khan Yunis, Deir al-Balah and al-Suwaida, in addition to the al-Nusayrat and al-Bureij camps. Also in Gaza City, civil defense teams managed to recover the bodies of 20 Palestinians killed in an airstrike on a house in the Darash neighborhood. After 99 days of siege, the number of people killed has risen to 23,700, plus over 60,000 wounded. 70% of the victims are women and children. At the same time, at least 12 civilians were killed, including children, and others were wounded during the early hours of this Saturday. The death followed an Israeli airstrike targeting a tent house housing displaced people east of the city of Rafah in the southern Gaza Strip. The Israeli occupation also killed 3 Palestinians, including 2 children, on Friday night as they were crossing the perimeter of Adora settlement in the occupied West Bank. After the incident, Israeli troops closed the entries to Palestinian towns of Idna and Tarkimiya. Meanwhile, the military continued its operations this Saturday in several areas of the West Bank, including assaults to the city of Bethlehem, where they made arrests and searched homes. Israel appealed to the International Court of Justice on Friday to refute allegations of genocide against the Palestinian people. The response by Israel's lawyers comes after South Africa, in its brief, asked the ICJ to issue an order compelling Tel Aviv to stop its bombing of the Gaza Strip. Genocide is any act committed with the intent to destroy a national, ethnic, racial or religious group. More than 20,000 Palestinians have been killed since the beginning of Israel's military operations against the Strip, mostly civilians, including women and children, as well as members of international organizations. St. Vincent and the Grenadines joined the bloc supporting South Africa's lawsuit against Israel for genocidal actions in Gaza. The government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, by means of a statement, affirmed that the aggression in Gaza must be stopped and a ceasefire implemented immediately to contain the humanitarian crisis that the actions of the occupation forces have caused in Palestinian territory. Likewise, it also stated that sending supplies to Israel and its allies makes nations complicit in genocide and its consequences. On Friday, the United Nations said Israel is blocking aid to hospitals in northern Gaza. The United Nations has said a slow and arbitrary inspections regime and a near-systematic rejection of attempts to move aid by Israeli authorities are blocking efforts to deliver much-needed humanitarian assistance to hospitals in northern Gaza. Andrea De Domenico, head of the United Nations Aid Agency OCHA's office in the occupied Palestinian territories, stated that the operations in the north are increasingly complicated and the Israelis have systematically or almost systematically refused to let aid through. On Friday, new communications blackout occurred in the midst of the Israeli attacks. All internet and telecommunication services in Gaza have been cut off as a result of the Israeli shelling of the Palestinian territory, according to the leading communications operator that on his Twitter account expressed that Gaza is once again in dark. Let's recall that this is the sixth blackout that has occurred since October 7th. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In Guatemala, there is expectation over the inauguration of Bernardo Arévalo as this 52nd president after months of protest against the country's Attorney General. On Friday, social organizations from rural regions announced that they are planning a sit-in in front of the public ministry next Sunday to support the inauguration of President-elect Bernardo Arévalo. They are also planning to hold a day for prayer for peace and democracy in Guatemala. The presidential inauguration comes after months of protests in which indigenous peoples and social movements, the General Consuelo Porras, respect the vote cast in last August 22nd. In Ecuador, in the midst of the serious crisis of insecurity and violence that the country is experiencing, the Ministry of the Interior announced that it will request criminal record certificates to foreigners entering from Peru and Colombia. The document to be issued in the country of origin or residence must be apostilled. Initially has been said that the provision will be enforced during the state of exception and the recognition of the internal armed conflict decreed by the President Daniel Noboa on January 8th, with a duration of 60 days. The measure, according to the office responsible for domestic policy, is oriented to control the entry of people who constitute a threat or risk to public safety. At the same time, President Noboa insists on expelling foreign prisoners, among them close to 1,500 Colombians imprisoned in Ecuador penitentiaries, an announcement that has caused controversy on the other side of the border. Ecuador will receive high-ranking military officials from Washington as alleged support amid tensions in the face of an escalation of violence that is plaguing the South American country. The U.S. Department of State announced that it will send the head of the Southern Command, General Laura Richardson, and top anti-narcotics and diplomatic officials to Quito to discuss with the government of President Daniel Noboa how to combat organized crime. The White House condemned the attacks described as terrorist attacks by criminal gangs after the leader of the most powerful criminal gang escaped in a confusing incident. The help that Washington could offer to Carondelet is related to the fight against drug trafficking and organized crime. In Peru, prosecutor's office requests 34 years in prison for ex-president Pedro Castillo. The public prosecutor's office, through its social networks, informed that it requested 34 years of imprisonment against the former president of the Republic, Pedro Castillo Terrones, for the crimes of rebellion, abuse of authority, and serious disturbance to public tranquility before the attempted coup d'etat in December 2022. Likewise, said public bodies request 25 years in prison against former Prime Minister Betsy Chavez Chino and former officials of different ministerial portfolios, Roberto Sánchez Palomino and Willy Huertas Oliva. In Colombia, at least 18 people died and over 30 were injured after a landslide in the northwestern state of Choco. The disaster occurred on Friday afternoon near the town of Carmen de Atrato, resulting in the closing of the road that covers the route from the city of Medellin to Quibdó. In the images shared on social networks and television channels, the destroyed cars can be clearly seen in the middle of heavy mud. According to the authorities, several landslides have made it difficult for rescuers and firefighters, which has led rescue forces to request assistance of helicopters to relieve the work. Concerning the tragedy in the department of Choco, Colombia, its governor made statements regarding the recovery of bodies and assistance to wounded at the scene.
Command posts in the department and have studied the coordination and dialogue with the National House of Risk Management. All the national and regional authorities are already coordinating and carrying out actions to achieve the recovery of bodies and immediate attention to the injured in Antioquia and Choco departments' health systems. Our priority is to ensure that our actions save as many lives as possible and to bring the injured together with their families.
The World Meteorological Organization, WMO, says 2023 has been the hottest year on record, but that 2024 could bring even higher temperatures. On Friday, the WMO and the United States National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, agreed with the Copernicus Climate Change Service on an increase in the global average temperature close to limit of 1.5 degrees Celsius. These organizations said El Niño weather pattern usually has a greater impact on temperatures. However, they predict 2024 to be even more warmer. WMO emphasized that climate change is the greatest challenge facing humanity for the changes it can bring about. On Saturday, in Ukraine, the Russian armed forces launched an attack with hypersonic weapons against the military-industrial complex. The offensive was carried out with long-range precision weapons using the Kinzhal hypersonic missile system. The Russian authorities confirmed damages to the production centers of projectiles, gunpowder, and unmanned aerial vehicles which were produced in these facilities. Explosions were also reported in several cities such as Kyiv, Poltava, Sumy, Cherkasy, and others. Russian authorities reported a fire that destroyed a warehouse in St. Petersburg, and so far no human losses have been reported. The Ministry of Emergency Situations detailed that the fire affected an area of 50,000 square meters of the facilities, so that about 270 firefighters and 57 emergency teams continued the work to control and extinguish the flames. At the same time, it is stated that the fire is classified at level 5 in difficulty of extinction. Meanwhile, the Public Prosecutor's Office announced that investigations have begun to determine the causes and responsibilities in the incident. In China's Taiwan region, the ruling party candidate Lai Ching-te won Saturday's election with more than 40% of the votes. Lai Ching-te, candidate of the Progressive Democratic Party (PDP), has won the elections held this Saturday to become the next leader of the island, obtaining more than 40% of the votes. Shortly after knowing the results, Lai assured that his priority as leader of the island is to maintain peace and stability on both sides of the Taiwan Strait and to keep the status quo in accordance with the constitutional system of China's republic. According to his statements, future government appointments will include officials from other parties, with a promise of giving priority to issues that have the consensus of the island's political forces. We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience. You can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with TeleSUR. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back. United States and United Kingdom launched airstrikes for a second consecutive night against Yemen. Yemeni authorities reported that the attack targeted the Al-Dalaimi military base near the airport of the city of Sana'a. Defense agencies specified that Washington used over 100 guided munitions to attack more than 60 targets in 16 different locations throughout the country. Officials also indicated that the cities affected by U.S. bombings are Sana'a, Al-Hudaydah, Damar, and Sada. The government of Venezuela has issued a special communique condemning the attacks by the United States and its Western allies against Yemen. The statement reads, "The Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela categorically condemns the bombing of Yemen carried out by the US, the United Kingdom and other countries, an illegal action in violation of international law that only contributes to further destabilization in the country. Furthermore, Venezuela insists that the only way to guarantee peace and stability in the Middle East is through the cessation of the genocide in the Gaza Strip carried out by Israel as well as accomplice with all United Nations resolutions for the establishment of a free and sovereign Palestinian state." And finally, the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela urges the international community to express pressure measures for the restoration of international law and justice in the area, avoiding an escalation of the conflict caused by the Israeli barbaric police policy in Palestine. Cuba's Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez condemned the attacks by the United States and its allies against Yemeni territory. Through his account on the social network X, the official expressed, "They condemned the military attacks by the United States and NATO allies in Yemen in violation of international law. Acts of this nature encourage genocide in Gaza. In the sense, Cuba reiterated their call for an immediate ceasefire in the Palestinian enclave." In turn, President Joe Biden said on Friday the U.S. will not let up on its response to the Houthi rebels if they continue with that behavior. Biden made the comments to reporters as he toured local businesses outside of Allentown in Pennsylvania. Iran-backed Houthi forces are vowing fierce retaliation after the U.S. and Britain launched multiple airstrikes targeting the military group, further raising the prospect of a wider conflict in a region already vested by Israel's war in Gaza. The president said despite the rising tensions, the United States and its allies are not in a proxy war with Iran, telling reporters he's already delivered a message to Tehran. Following the US and UK attacks on Yemen, the Houthis promised not to leave unanswered and unpunished these attacks on their territory. In a statement issued on Friday, the Yemeni rebel movement threatened to attack sources of threat and all hostile targets on land and sea in defense of its territory. The group also assured that it will continue its offensive in one of the most important sea lanes in the world until Israel puts an end to the offensive against Hamas in the Gaza Strip. On the other hand, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the Islamic Resistance Movement of Iraq, and the Islamic Resistance Movement of Lebanon, Hezbollah, condemned the open aggression of the United States and the United Kingdom against Yemen and reaffirmed their support for Yemen in the face of the aggression of the US and its Western allies. In the United States, citizens marched in the streets to demonstrate their support for Yemen and Palestine. The protesters gathered outside the building that houses the permanent mission of Yemen to the United Nations in New York. The crowd spoke out against the actions of President Joe Biden and his administration in relation to Israel's aggression in Gaza and the recent attacks on Houthi ground positions in Yemen. Citizens accused the president of genocide while demanding to stop U.S. aid to Israel. In this context, the Tehran, capital of Iran, citizens support the Houthis with mobilizations after the attacks of the United States and the United Kingdom. The demonstrators expressed slogans and prayers in support of Yemen, "O Yemen, the hero, we support you," and "Death to the United States," as expressed by demonstrators. The demonstrators also said the Arab countries should continue their struggle against the oppressors and follow Yemen. Resistance group in Iraq attacked U.S. base illegally established in that territory. On Saturday, the Iraqi resistance reported at least 130 attacks against Washington's command post at Conoco oil field in northeastern Syria. in response to some 53 actions targeting Iraqi territory and another 77 against Syrian forces. In this context, the Iraqi resistance also said the Israeli base in solidarity with the cause of the Palestinian people. We have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net and join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram and TikTok as well. For TeleSUR English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.